Welcome to one of the more insane patents I've ever dealt with in recreating patents on this channel so far. Now, this wonderful pistol grip wrench, as it's called, was adequately patented on what is known as Black Tuesday, the start of the Great Depression, because only a tool of this caliber could produce such insane chaos within the stock market. Its beauty is too immense for humanity to truly comprehend. Its genius perhaps unsurpassed in all of human history. This beast of a design is most likely the hardest, most difficult machining task I have ever done so far, and it might stay that way for a while because there are a number of insanely intricate parts and incredibly fine details that I need to get correct, and I don't have the 1 million years of machining experience needed to even get close to perfection, but we're going to do it. We're going to try, and we're going to attempt it. This exact design, as described in the wonderful patent itself, was formed when Mr. Clary Toon of Tennessee decided that, hey, I have a gun holster on me at all times, so why not have a wrench shaped like a gun so that we can always have it at the ready to go. Now, I'm not entirely sure if he thought that through in the sense of which was more useful at the time, the pistol or the wrench in 1920s rural Tennessee. No idea. I would probably choose the pistol, although wrenching's my favorite. So, not the best on the full idea here, but regardless, it is just amazing. Now, one minor caveat before we get started. I found this patent after seeing one of these wrenches, and only one to ever be in existence, and I saw it online. It was made by Rex Engineering Company of Cincinnati, Ohio, sometime after this patent was issued, I'm assuming, and possibly for the actual inventor or patenter in this case. It has a slightly different design, as most production models do compared to their glorious patented drawing counterparts, but that company seemed to offer a service where they would make one-off items like this for your inventions, and they advertised that in Popular Mechanics at the time. So I don't think there are more, at least they haven't been found, but I would like to make one that is actually closest to the patent that we can. The one that was made is too different, and I want to see this exact patent come to life. If possible, we'll see what I can pull off. I have some 4140 steel. It is aggressive and might be a challenge, but let's go for it, and we'll see what happens. Oh boy, here we go. This is an ordeal for me, personally. As the world's greatest machinist, this still scares me. I bought some big chunks of 4140, and I'm undecided on the heat treating. I don't know if I should do that or not, because not only is it a lengthy process, I'm just concerned about warping and or cracking, specifically in the top jaw, which stresses me out. It has a lot of 90-degree corners, and that could lead to le craquings, as they're called. Regardless, I'm taking the cuts extremely slowly, very lightly. I'm not the speeds and feeds guy, I'm the slows and lows guy because the milling machine needs love, as in an entire replacement, and all of my tooling is dull. And I just treat things like garbage on my milling machine, essentially, because of those two previous reasons. It allows me some flexibility. Since I'm a genius machinist with over 200 years of personal and combined experience with myself, I'm going to flip this over now and use these slots here to re-index what's going on. I'm also not going to change any position. It should be okay. And then we'll do this, and then I'm just going to cut this out and try to save these pieces for other parts of the ranch, because this is an expensive piece of steel. Is this hot? Ah! Now, indexing this correctly as I flip it around 17,000 times will eventually lead to errors, if not immediately. And that's just something I'm going to have to deal with. You know, if I had a CNC machine, or even if I had a DRO, or even further, if I just didn't do everything by eye and actually used math. Lots of things could be done, apparently, with milling machines that I've never heard of before. But what can you do? Learn new things? No, we don't have time for that. We're here to hog out some steel to make a ridiculous gun wrench. I'm using this weird foaming cutting oil that CRC sent me. It's very cool and actually works. It's extremely sticky, and it melts a little bit, but stays like violently sticky for an oil, and it's it kind of works really well. I didn't have any overheating issues. I also keep things slow and low, as you know, but it's nice, and it smokes beautifully, if I do say so myself. Watch how the shavings glisten in the light, shooting like stars onto the raw wooden floor, creating a fire hazard right here in my shop. Okay, so at this point I've moved on. I don't have time for the previous piece of steel. I need time for this piece of steel. This is a new piece of steel. I squared it up off camera. This is the bottom jaw, which is going to need a series of holes drilled all the way through it. And these holes will eventually be squared off to accept the top jaw sliding into them. Kind of stressful. Everything here is stressful. I don't like the way I clamp anything. I don't like how aggressive of a movement my milling machine makes if I even climb cut for 1.2 seconds. And I also don't want to mess anything up, as I don't have a lot of this steel, and I don't want to start over again. And that's pretty much everybody on Earth with any project. Once you put work into it, you don't want to even think about it. Now, being a master machinist with over 300 years of combined experience, I could not get deep enough with enough grasp to punch all the way through, so cry for me. I will just file it into position. There's only a few millimeters, if any, right here. Do not worry yourselves. Luckily, I restored this die filing machine previously. Otherwise, the amount of filing this would have taken, I'd probably still be doing that. I'd still be doing that. 2024 would just be filing. I'd turn into a filing-based YouTube channel. Look at that fit, though. Look at the gaps and how they're consistently gapped. I almost feel like I know what I'm doing sometimes. I've chosen an Acme thread as to be original to the patent, although it wasn't, I guess, specified in the patent, but you just know this era. It's going to be Acme threaded, and Acme thread taps are odd. They cut kind of a normal thread profile first, and then the final Acme thread profile. The moment of truth. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, excellent. Excellent. Now, due to my brain malfunctioning, I had to do this to the tap, unfortunately. The nice expensive tap I had to cut and then further turn into a bottoming out tap so I could make it all the way to the bottom of this hole. This tap is meant to go all the way through holes because I'm a genius, and I guess I got the tap that is not going to work unless I did this to it. So, another problem made worse by my brain. Now, I've put just a quick paper template on the largest piece of 4140 I had to purchase. If I had a forge, it would have been nice to kind of forge a smaller piece into place. But I don't at the moment, but hopefully shall in the future. And I'm just going to drill some holes to potentially relocate things as I move this around more and more. It's also on a rotary table, which isn't the most secure in the world. So a lot of what I had to do, I just had to do with what I had available to me, which is more than the average human being, but still not enough. I could have spent a couple of $1,000s on appropriate tools and tooling to get things done here, but we shall make it work. I'm trying to hog out the main handle area where two wooden scales would go on either side of it, so I need to kind of remove a 1/4 inch of material on either side, leaving me with a 1/4 inch area to attach the scales to. I also bought some new cheapo end mills for this process because I didn't trust that I should be using the good ones. Okay, it's literally shaping up. After I cut this, I just machined the edges off, apparently with my teeth. Regardless, there are some other things to consider at the moment. There is a hole right here that accepts the thready boy, and that needs to be perfectly positioned so that this is not angled in any way, so that when it closes, it's not beautiful. So we'll probably drill this hole first, just to make sure I've already marked it. And then I will think about how I attach this to here, because in the patent document and also in the general remade one that someone did 1 million years ago, it's just kind of pinned in here. This doesn't look pinned though, so I'm not entirely sure. I think I might just round these edges over and drill and slot a hole here with rounded edges and shabam them together and probably braze it in is my thinking. The other issue is that this jaw can only open as much as there is thread distance within here. So I'll have to cut this at some point and make it functional. We'll see. We'll see. This is illegal. Don't ever do this. I'm not smart.
What I mean by illegal is truly barely clamp something on the edge of a vise and do a full depth machining cut on it. Somebody is having an aneurysm over what I'm doing right now. I did pre-purchase the Acme rod because there's no way I'm cutting that on the lathe to perfection, especially this lathe, so a very nice time saver. This beautiful brass gear was also pre-purchased because I'm not cutting gear teeth on the ghetto milling machine. Now, this can obviously only screw in to the depth of almost the entire length of that bottom jaw there. Otherwise, it would thread right through and defeat the purpose. But that essentially sets the jaw opening. I filed and messed around with this until it was very snug in there, and it fits nicely, so I'm happy. Now, this is kind of an error, kind of not. I should have maybe just not machined the hole out of this part, but I'll cut it off the stabby shaft part of the wrench to make up for that. I don't know how it would be attached to the main body of the wrench other than pinning. I thought about brazing it, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just going to solder the actual brass gear to the Acme rod, and that'll be more than enough. There's not a lot of force getting transferred here. Now, if you remember from the pattern, there's two gears, like this, and then another two bevel gears that kind of transfer the trigger mechanism motion into the jaw opening motion. So I'm just finalizing the other one here.
Okay, let's discuss a little bit about what I'm trying to do here. So this is now soldered on, and I need to have this interface exquisitely so that this can turn this, which moves this up and down. Very nice, yay. This piece is the back end of this gear that I cut off. I haven't finished that, but I shall. And I will have to solder it or braze it or whatever to this bottom part once I make a nice flat on there. And that's going to essentially set the position of this so perfectly that it touches the gears in the exact way that I need it to, and then I can shove the little thingamadoodle in here. And the thingamadoodle is actually this, which is the trigger mechanism. The adjuster will go right about here, and this piece is this piece. So I have to decide this all first, because once I bend this into shape, it's a certain thickness and it gets screwed in, and if there's not enough gap for that metal piece, this will just jam and touch. So that's all I'm focusing on now. Lots to consider when you're considering things.
This small steel plate here is a design feature in the patent which I don't fully agree with. It's odd. I'm not sure why the inventor chose to include this piece when a different method of attachment could have been used. I don't know why it's screwed to the main body. Could have just been welded or soldered on, or just not used at all, in my opinion. But what am I expecting from a man who designed this and thought of this in their spare time? This hole here is going to be for the rod that the trigger, the knurled brass trigger adjuster mechanism needs to ride on.
Okay, I have an actual machinist friend who I'm going to call immediately after cutting this, because I'm worried he will die. Just in the aura, he'll feel it of what I'm about to do. I'm sorry. Oh, God. What? Don't like it. I don't like the sounds. I don't like the sounds. I don't know if it's moving. It feels like it's moving in a place I don't want it to move. Okay, just a little more. Okay, I can't. It's too stressful. It is working, yes, yes.
Now, all of this work is merely to attach this plate onto the wrench. The little carved out scalloped indent is so the bevel gear can fit in nicely and compact, and it's merely to make the mechanism more compact for truly no reason. Another few millimeters and I wouldn't have had to do any of this. Tapping this was so ridiculously stressful. 4140s is intense sometimes. There, now it's attached. Thank you. Wow. Could have just soldered the brass ring on to the main body. I'm just cold forging this because I don't want to dent it at all on the outside with a metal hammer, and trying to limit the damage on the inside as well to make a nice kind of curved trigger guard. And I'm trying to get as close to the drawing as possible here. The trigger guard is also the mechanism that holds that second gear, and therefore the bevel gear as well. Now I'm going to attempt to solder this trigger guard on, but I don't want to get stuff too hot that I melt the other solder, since in the pattern it doesn't really make sense how any of this is attached to each other. This whole section of the patent is odd to me, but we'll stick with it and make it work. Now, unfortunately for the actual brass adjuster here, which wasn't specifically mentioned to be brass, but of course, we gon' brassify. I have to use just an oversized massive chunk and waste a bunch of it, and it kind of makes me sad. But that's what I had lying around. This is still the same piece of stock that I have from the steam engine restoration, if you recall that. The knurling truly hurts my lathe soul, along with just everyday basic tasks, but this specifically seems to cause my lathe to make the most noise. Now, we drilled that out just to have enough room to place this bevel gear in there and kind of hide it, inset it beautifully so that it's not, the main part of the mechanism, which I think is like a nice detail. So this is the first dry assembly. You've got to look at how the mechanism's going to function here all together. Now that I believe everything is lined up and machined accordingly. Look at it. It's fairly smooth too. Not too shabby. Could use a little cleanup, but I can do that off camera.
I haven't really decided on the final shape and style of the handle and all this part, so I'm gonna do that now on the fly, but I wanted to do kind of all that first. Let's start grinding.
This truly took hours. Same with the handles. This was like hand filing and sanding and grinding, all to end up at me needing to rejig this up to cut out this 3/4 inch circle here to accept these brass medallions that I've chosen as a design element. For whatever reason, I just am addicted to the brassification of things so much that I will risk the entire machined tool just to be able to press this in. That was supposed to happen. Time for pinning. Now, if you could only see how this is jigged up, how this is secured in a vise appropriately to perfectly line these up, you would cry. Luckily, I give you that opportunity right here.
I broke the trigger guard off, the trigger guard off, the trigger guard off. I broke the trigger guard off, I broke the trigger guard off.
Now, I was hoping to get those pins deformed enough through painting them down in to the main body of the wrench that they wouldn't show after I sanded it, and I got fairly close. But what can you do? Now I'm kind of setting this sloppy gap to be tighter or looser depending on how the mechanism wants to function here. Luckily there is room for that adjustment, and I've pushed it all the way forward just for the purpose of gluing that brass shaft for the brass adjuster in place. And now I'm just applying my usual wipe-on polyurethane. A bunch of coats of this should keep it sealed for the future. And here it is. Fully functional. Gloriously mechanical. Acoustically sensual. Wrenchery to the max. The grip is tight. The motion smooth. The adjustment mechanism slow yet refined.
Okay, let's very quickly talk about what I've done here exactly. Essentially, I feel like I don't know what metric is anymore when I hold this. It's too powerful. It feels fantastic. Like I can't stop doing this. Regardless, there are a few design elements I just want to mention to you very quickly. This is Jatoba. Okay, very nice, very hard, beautiful, exquisite. Okay, this over here, in my opinion, is an error on my part. And I'm sorry, I'm garbage. These little side things that are now filled with epoxy For some reason, I rounded over on both sides of this thing. I rounded over when I was machining, and I should have just either drilled a bigger hole, but I don't have the end mills for that on hand, or just not rounded the edges over, and then this would have set nicely. What can you do? The soldering is fixed. It might not be the greatest still, but it seems to be much better. This is off position slightly, but it is just glued in. This whole brass rod is just glued in, because in the patent, it doesn't really tell you how it's attached and how it should be attached. Hurts my brain. Also, these seem to fit very well. These were just pre-purchased bevel gears and just straight gears. They're glorious and they do the job. This is about the max opening. There's just a little bit of play, and it comes from that gap that was needed for this gear to actually sit in. Otherwise, it's nice. You almost want to use it with two hands because the front is just so heavy, but you can one-hand it if you really need to. I think this was probably the hardest thing that I've tried to do so far in the workshop. In terms of pure fabrication, it's crazy. And it came out fairly nice, I think, in my opinion. But I hope you enjoyed, because you want to touch. We all want to touch. You can touch with your eyes.